It's great to have the social giant with us, Facebook, in the form of Carolyn Everson, who is VP of Global Marketing Solutions, and she'll be interviewed by AdExchanger's Allison Schiff. Please welcome Carolyn and Allison.
Hi, I'm Allison Schiff. I'm a senior editor with AdExchanger, as John mentioned, and I'm really excited to have Carolyn Everson with us. Carolyn is the VP of Global Marketing Solutions at Facebook, which means she's in constant contact with marketers and top agency executives. And she's just about to celebrate her 7th anniversary at Facebook, so you really know how this thing ticks. And Facebook has been, in the headlines a lot, the national headlines this year. And I'd actually like to start talking about some of the things that have, kept Facebook so top of mind this year. A mixture of some controversies and also, just explosive, seemingly unstoppable growth. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I'm not quite sure I've totally figured out how it ticks yet, but I'm still trying.
I think you're closer than other people. So I'd be remiss if I didn't start out by asking a question about the change to Facebook's newsfeed algorithm. I think if you maybe took a poll of some of the brands and the publishers in the room, they would see it as almost like an apocalypse. They're freaking out a little bit about distribution on Facebook. Are they wrong about that, or is this it, basically?
Well, let me just set some context for the room. So at the end of the day, when Mark set out to build Facebook, and he wrote in our IPO letter a number of years ago, he had sort of 3 goals at that time. One was to build meaningful connections between people. The second was to help all businesses grow, small and large. And the third was to have a civil and safe community for people to have discourse. And when we reflected, particularly on the year of 2017, and we looked at how the platform was being utilized, what we started to see, based on a lot of research that had been done, there were studies done at Cornell, at University of San Diego, at Yale, a number of universities, we started to see that there was a difference in how people reacted when they were utilizing Facebook, if they passively consumed content or if they had meaningful interactions with family, with video, with news content, et cetera. And so Mark foreshadowed this newsfeed algorithm change a couple of times over the last few months. And when he came back and started the year, he put on a personal challenge that he was going to really spend time, not just on the execution and fixing things that he believed needed to be fixed, but more on the academia and the research to understand how people are consuming media. And the newsfeed algorithm change is really meant to drive what we are calling meaningful interactions. Now, you may all be wondering, well, what exactly is a meaningful interaction? And the truth is that we have some indications of what those are. It's when people engage in dialogue, when they comment, when they share more, when they're engaged with the content as opposed to just a passive consumption behavior. And what we're trying to do with the algorithm change is put more content, particularly from friends and family and trusted news sources and videos that talk in creative communities of people. That's the kind of content that we find people react better to, and it's actually even better for their mental health. It is early stages. No one should be freaking out. We make algorithm changes constantly at Facebook, and we're always trying to understand how to, first and foremost, give people the very best experience. All of our products are built for people first. This algorithm change is meant to be for people first. And what we will commit to is sharing our learnings, and I am certain it will continue to evolve as we learn more as a company as well.
I know this change is really about organic reach, but is there any impact on the paid side? I know Mark mentioned that people will be spending potentially a little less time on the platform. Maybe the engagements will be more meaningful, but less time overall, which might result in less inventory, higher prices.
Well, the ad ranking is not going to change. And interestingly enough, if you take a real step back, on the ad side of the business, the algorithm, in terms of the ad ranking, has always tried to optimize around the value to people. So the more relevant an ad to a person, that ad would get higher ranked and frankly pay a lower price. The better the creative, the more relevant the creative, they would pay a lower price in the auction. And so to some degree, the ad system has been leading in terms of really being about people first and relevance and meaningful interactions. And a meaningful interaction could very well be, and often is, that I'm finding out about a new app or a new product or service that I want to buy, and I get that information in my news feed. So the ad ranking is not going to be changing. Certainly at this point, that's what we've indicated. It's really the organic news feed algorithm that is getting adjusted. I think for brands, the bigger question has always been, and should always be, how do I create meaningful content and interactions for people? And the more the brands are there to serve people, and whether that serve is about teeing up a new product or to create an emotion or evoke an emotion, to entertain, to make people laugh, to make people cry, to inform people, the more it's about building for people, the better. The problem is that so much advertising these days is still meant to be directed at people, right? By definition, the word advert is to take people and distract them and get them focused on your advertising. What we've always wanted to do is build a platform where the ads are as good and as meaningful as the content from family and friends. And to some degree, I really believe that the progress we've made on the ad side of the business has been substantial, and brands are really starting to understand that they're there to serve people, not to be just the ability to disrupt people.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the year ahead, because that's what Industry Preview is all about. And Mark put out his resolutions recently about fixing Facebook. So what is he referring to when he says fix Facebook? And what does that look like from a practical perspective? What actually has to happen?
So Mark has always done these annual challenges, and for the most part, they've been very personal challenges around his development. The last one that was very particular to the company was actually back in 2009 when we were going through the recession, and he decided to wear a tie every day. Engineers typically don't wear ties every day to work, and he wanted to set a tone of really seriousness around the company. And so that was a very specific challenge. But since then, I should say, he's learned Mandarin, he's run a mile each day, he's read new books every week, which he shared with the community. And so he's done a variety of these personal challenges. This year was a very different one for him, because when he talks about what he wants to spend time on, he's actually saying he wants to spend more time on the research, the sociology, and the psychology of how social media and how people are consuming content on all of our platforms, and are there certain things that we need to do better? And they certainly are. So starting with the mission, which he revised a year ago. The mission used to be just about connecting people, right? Make the world more open and connected. And we still have billions of people that are not connected, and we're working with lots of our peer companies in the space to get more people connected. However, it's not good enough what we've learned to just connect people, because the world has become incredibly divided. There's a rise of isolationism and nationalism. And so he pushed the mission even a year ago to say, connecting people to what? And he really determined that actually community was at the heart of it, that if you build better communities online, that can even influence communities offline. So that's one piece he wants to dig down on. The second is around making sure that Facebook is a safe environment. So we have been incredibly aggressive and will continue to be. There is no place for hate or terrorism on our platform, and yet we know that sometimes some of that content can get on the platform. And so Mark is really digging in, hiring more people, putting better policies in place, frankly, better machine learning that can identify that content and get it down as quickly as possible. And then in the third area, it's really around civil discourse and governance. Obviously, with the interference that we had from that state-sponsored interference that we had around the US election, not only us, but a lot of our peer companies in the digital space, we really want to make sure that we are doing everything possible so that Facebook and all of our platforms are the safest environment for people to have civil discourse, and that there is integrity when it comes to elections. So when Mark says, I'm going to set out these challenges that are very Facebook focused. It really is not, again, just him calling meetings and executing things. It's about him getting underneath the academia research to understand how best to do this. We're carving out a very new space. It's not like we have books to read about how you can do this, because it was never done before. And yet we do look a lot in the history. We look at what technology changes happened during the Industrial Revolution. How did communities respond to that? How were new jobs created? How can technology be a force for good, but also be a realist that there are bad actors out there, and we've got to do everything we possibly can to make our platform as safe as possible.
Well, changing tacks slightly, I think of you as a sort of CMO whisperer in a way. I mean, you spend a lot of time talking to advertisers. So as we head into 2018, what's on their mind? What are they asking for, and what are some of their concerns?
Well, I think the number one thing that any CMO asks for and will always ask for, if I had to drill down their job to one word, it would come down to growth, right? A CMO at the end of the day is charged with growth of their business. In terms of what CMOs are asking for, we have 6 million advertisers on Facebook. Now, small businesses don't have CMOs, so I'm talking more around the medium and larger business. And you have to really bifurcate the market, because you have traditional companies that have been around for decades, if not 100+ years, who have very different concerns than the CMOs of the emerging digital native disruptor companies. So when I'm speaking to the CMO of Airbnb or Netflix, I have a very different conversation with them versus a CMO of a large packaged good company. And you have to understand the different dilemmas that each have. So starting with the large traditional companies, they're under increased pressure with activist investors who are really looking at their overall marketing budget and drilling down on the efficiency and whether or not their marketing is working the way it needs to. They have a ton of competition from the disruptors who are coming at them on every vertical, no matter what vertical you name: auto, healthcare, CPG, every single one of them are being impacted by disruptors. So what they're trying to do, very much in a nutshell, as I would describe it, is they're trying to transform to become mobile best marketers. They know the consumer has shifted to mobile. There's not a single CMO out there that is not aware that people are spending more time on mobile than anything else. And yet, the ecosystem, the way they're structured, the way they've gone to market is still very traditional in many ways. And so they're kind of retooling, changing the tires while trying to drive the car at 60 miles an hour. So that's one set of challenges. On the disruptor side, their growth is incredible growth, right? Very, very fast paced. They're usually mobile centric. But what they're trying to understand is, how do you build a brand that is going to be relevant for 100+ years, like the more traditional companies? And so what I see is if you put and again, I'm trying to simplify it for the purpose of the discussion, but the traditional companies are trying to learn a lot from disruptors about how they're data-driven, mobile first, nimble. They test, you learn, iterate, scale very quickly. The disruptors have huge respect for companies that have been around for 100+ years and want brands that consumers love and will pick over, other cheaper options, because they've actually built an equity in their brand that consumers can identify with. So I see a lot of learnings between the groups, but my conversations are very different depending on who I talk to. I'll give you another very real example. The debate around viewability and verification and how we measure things. When I talk to Netflix, Airbnb, Wish, Amazon, any of the e-commerce driven companies, they know exactly what happens when they put $1 into our system or $1 into any platform. It's totally measurable. They have closed loop. They know exactly what they're doing in terms of a measurement standpoint and feel confident with the investment. The more traditional companies who don't necessarily have the closed loop, they don't have the end retail data the way they would like to, need to use proxy measures. So that is, the viewability verification never comes up in the discussions with the disruptors, and it comes up often with the more traditional companies. And you have to understand that that's reasonable based on where each of those types of companies are sitting. So very different conversations depending on who I'm speaking with.
Although surely advertisers are also asking Facebook to share more data. I mean, we had Lou Pascalis on stage from Bank of America earlier this morning talking about that deep desire, privacy considerations, of course. So what is Facebook, doing to share more, data with advertisers for attribution, for, cross-channel measurement? I imagine that there are a lot of requests for that.
So there definitely is. So the way we think about data is, number one, and we released our ad principles a short time ago, and one of the most important principles is that we don't sell data. So we protect PII, and we will protect PII as if it is literally the core foundation of the company. So when advertisers are asking for more data, we always have to draw the line that it's never, ever going to be PII. Okay, so if you were to, I always think of an analogy of a football field. If PII is at the 1 yard line, that's where it stops. But there's 99 other yards of opportunities to work together. So what are some of those opportunities? When we look at measurement, we look at it in 3 different buckets. We first look at reach and frequency. So we need to provide enough data, and we certainly do now in partnership with Nielsen, as well as ComScore and others, so that advertisers can measure reach and frequency across their campaigns. We think that's super important. So what are they getting on Facebook versus what are they getting on other digital platforms, and can they compare it to TV? That, we think, is essential. That's just the basic building blocks. We provide data and opportunities to measure brand and attitudinal measures, ad recall, intent to purchase, so on and so forth. The third area is outcomes, and that gets tricky because advertisers would ideally love to be able to pinpoint whether or not you particularly saw an ad as Allison and you bought something. And that is something that we cannot do because of PII. But what we can do is we can aggregate data, we can give a sense of the impact from an attribution standpoint. I do think that there has been unfair criticism around us, being in a walled garden. At the end of the day, our entire business relies on the trust that people have in giving us access to their information, and we are going to protect PII fiercely, but there is a whole lot we can do on those 99 yards to allow marketers to be more informed and understand attribution. Where I do think we have to make significant progress, and it's a priority of mine and my teams this year, is on cross-platform attribution. So Lou is totally correct in saying that marketers don't have a real easy way to compare apples to apples across all of the platforms. And that is on the agenda. We're working towards different options for doing it. It's complicated. And I think increasing privacy regulations like GDPR in Europe also have to be considered. Any company that is operated based in Europe or operates business in Europe, so that's certainly us and probably, it's obviously most every multinational out there, we are going to have to comply with GDPR, and we fully intend to comply with that. That is going to be more restrictive. And so this balancing act of wanting the holy grail of every piece of data versus what is actually acceptable by law, of course, but also what's acceptable by consumers, that's a very nuanced discussion, and I think it's easier. Sometimes it's easy to just say we need more data, but you have to actually get underneath it and realize that it's complicated. It's like peeling an onion, and we have to do things in a very privacy-safe way.
So we actually only have time for one more question, and I'd like to hear what you have to say in terms of a prediction. Let's say we were sitting here in January 2019. What are we, talking about? And where are we in terms of Facebook and the resolutions and where we are with cross-channel measurement, for example?
I'll put the predictions in maybe 3 different buckets. So I'll start with consumer behavior first, because I always think that's the most important place to start for all of us. I think you're going to see just a continued explosion in mobile video growth across all platforms. Every time we estimate video growth, we continue to underestimate it. Consumers seem to have an insatiate appetite for that format, and so I think you're going to see incredible growth there. You're going to see continued growth and very impressive growth with stories as a format. So, we think of things in formats. So feed is a format, and certainly Facebook has a feed, Instagram has a feed, Twitter has a feed, Pinterest, so on and so forth. You're going to see stories continue to explode. It's taken off so dramatically on Instagram. We now have it available on all of our platforms, and consumers love the ephemeral content. They love the ability to really update throughout their day and not have that perfect curated post. So I think stories are going to be an increasing important part of the whole ecosystem. I think you're also going to see the continued explosion of messaging applications. So between our Messenger, WhatsApp, and Instagram Direct, we have some of the top messaging apps in the world, and certainly all you have to do is look to China to see how consumers are utilizing those apps, and we see tremendous growth and opportunity there. So I think those are going to be the major themes on the consumer side. On the measurement, I think cross-platform is going to be the #1 request. I think last year was about getting the verification, third-party verification. We now have 24 third-party partners verifying things on Facebook. Last year was about getting major publishers on board with the MRC. We now have 3 audits underway to be accredited with the MRC. So a lot of that, I would call it basic infrastructure work, was done last year. This year, I think, is going to be the next step around making progress on cross-platform measurement. And then I think you're going to continue to see enormous disruption across every vertical. The dynamic that I shared before with the disruptors and the traditional companies. I think you're going to see some acquisitions of traditional companies acquiring the disruptors to get that capability to sort of change their culture in-house. And I think you're going to see some of these disruptors emerge as brands that are going to be around and brands that we're talking about for decades to come. So I think depending on which area you're looking at, and I think the one piece we didn't get a chance to talk about, which underlies all of it, is culture. At the end of the day, when people ask me, well, is it a particular vertical that understands mobile better, is a better advertiser? There's no particular vertical, there's no particular way other than the people across the table from you. Do you have the right clients and the right agency partners working hand in hand to move the business forward? And a lot of that is culture change that many of us and these companies all have to go through. But we see it as a 3-way stool between clients, agencies, and Facebook. Sometimes FMPs and developers are certainly on that, so it's sometimes a 4-legged stool. But when you have everybody working together, the best part of this day and age is that the magic that can happen on all of these platforms and the growth that you can drive for your business is extraordinary. And I think at the end of the day, that's the only thing that matters. When people invest in our platforms, are we growing their business? And if we're not, they should not invest until we can figure out how to do that.
Carolyn, thank you. We'll see more in terms
Thank
of
you.
measurement.
Thank you very much. Thank you.